politics and your business. Are you sick of politics? Are you sick yet? Right now it's late September 2020 when I'm recording this. And so we're in the last final days, the final month, getting into the final month of the U.S. presidential election. And that's enough to drive anybody crazy. Now, I'm not against politics. Honestly, I grew up in the world of politics. I had an uncle who was at first a city council person and then was a congressperson. During that time, while he was both while he was in the city council, I got to experience a lot of the ground game when it came to politics, the grassroots stuff. And then when he was a congressman, I got to do more of that, and I also got to experience the other side, which is after a person's in office, getting behind the scenes and seeing all the ins and outs and hearing all the stuff that you never end up hearing in the media. It's crazy. It's a crazy world. It's crazier than you think behind the scenes. And it's been quite an adventure. I have very strong political beliefs, but I don't let that get in the way of how I view life and how I view people. And one of the things that's driven me to a point of being so extreme that I've ended up backing away from that idea of trying to shove it down people's throats. Because one thing I've seen, because I've been involved for so long, you can't force an ideal on somebody. I think it was Dale Carnegie that said, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, something like that. And that's true, because if a person's decided something on an emotional basis, you're never going to convince them otherwise unless you convince them emotionally, or you help them to drop the emotions to see reality for what it is. Because no matter what, even if they've agreed to something that is honestly true, if they're believing it for the wrong reasons, they're believing it for the wrong reasons. They're going to spread it the wrong way. They're going to push it on others. And so you've got people from all ends of the political spectrums saying a lot of the right things, but doing it in the wrong attitude. So what's this have to do with my business, Brian? You want to talk about business. Okay, here's what it has to do with your business. Because the same thing's true of your business in a sense. We all have kind of an emotional attachment to our business, especially if you're the one that started it, if you're the owner, if you're the main person in charge. Chances are you've got a connection to that business that is oftentimes too emotional. And if you can back away from that and see people for who they are and see that they've got their whole day and life running through their head at the time when you're trying to sell your idea to them. You're trying to sell a product, you're trying to sell a service, you're trying to sell an idea to them. Someone. If you're in business, you are. That's what you're doing. So it's a lot like politics. A lot like politics. The only thing is that the lines aren't as clearly drawn. It's not as easy to see the people that are most likely to be your customers versus not likely to be your customers, depending on what you're selling, of course. For some industries, it's very clear. But for a lot, it isn't clear. You don't know who's already set up to be a customer, and you just need to line them up and point them in the right direction, or the ones that, will never be a customer. They are so far removed from what you're providing that you should not even waste a breath on them. These are all things to take into account, but the most important thing for you as a person that's trying to persuade people is to not get caught up in the drama of the scenario and make yourself one of the players of the game, trying to make yourself a piece on the chessboard, okay? You gotta be above it all and helping move the chess pieces around, not down on the chessboard with everyone else. That's what our emotional states tend to put us on the chessboard. You end up playing a game that you can't win. As soon as you're playing it, you're not going to win. The winner is always the person that isn't playing it the same way that everyone else is playing. So you got to be able to separate from it and see where people are at. and then communicate with them in that sense. So a lot of people with politics, well, most people, if you noticed, it's all about confrontation. It's all about, why are you so stupid? Why don't you get it? Why don't you understand what we're trying to tell you? Don't you read? Don't you look at the same things? And if you go and watch that movie, Social Dilemma, that I spoke about a night or two ago, the plain situation is we're not all reading the same things or watching the same things or paying attention. We don't live in the same world. We're getting different news sources. We have different entertainment sources. We have different everything. And so we're not living in the same world. Some people, most of us, are extremely uneducated on a number of topics. Maybe we don't need to be educated on those topics. But that means we can't exactly come out and take a position on something that someone else knows a whole lot more about. You could take a position, but you may not be right. And these are all things to take into account when you're dealing with the world today. It's always been that way. People have always been this way. They've always been emotional. It's just, it's so much more obvious now. So what do all these different ideas all come to? What it really all comes down to is pull yourself out of the emotion of both politics of the day and the politics in your business. Your communication with the outside world has to be based on a non-emotional basis for it to be true, for it to be clear-cut, and for you to be able to maneuver where necessary and be able to admit when you're wrong. When you took a position that you shouldn't have taken, when you promoted a product you shouldn't have promoted, you got to be able to come out and say, hey, that was my fault. I know we were promoting this one brand at this point, but to tell you the truth, what we found out is this, and this about that brand. But here's a brand that you should know about. This one over here. If you've got that type of honesty and that ability to be able to pull back and not get caught up in the whole ego trap of running a business, you'll gain trust and you'll keep your sanity, which is really what it's all about. If you could just keep saying while everyone else is going nuts, then you'll survive. You'll find a way through it. I think we may talk a little bit more about surviving and pressing forward tomorrow. Hey, in the meantime, if you haven't gotten a copy of my new book, 9 Ways to Amazon Proof Your Business, you don't know what you're missing. You go get a free copy, electronic copy, online over at amazonproofbook.com, or you could also get a hard copy there after you order the electronic copy. You'll get a chance to get a hard copy, or you can just go to amazon.com or any of the other bookstores out there. Go type it into Google and you'll find it. 9 Ways to Amazon Proof Your Business. We'll be back here tomorrow. In the meantime, get out there and let the magic happen.